Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we'll journey into one of the most powerful and moving stories in human history. The story of a man who didn't just look at the stars, but changed forever the way the world looked at itself. His name was Galileo Galilei. But this is not simply a story about science. It is a story about courage, conviction, and a mind that refused to stop asking questions even when silence was safer. It's about a man who was punished for being right, a thinker who chose truth over comfort, curiosity over obedience, and discovery over fear. He was not born wealthy or privileged. He was born curious, and that curiosity made him the father of modern science. His life was filled with struggle, love, danger, discovery, and the most daring thing of all, a refusal to stop thinking. And here's the bonus. While you listen, you'll also improve your English. Because this story is told in clear, slow, meaningful English, perfect for listening practice, vocabulary, and fluency. So stay with me till the end. This is not just a biography, it's a lesson in courage and curiosity. Let's begin. Let's travel back more than 4.5 centuries to the year 1564 in the city of Pisa, Italy. Europe was ruled by kings and churches. There was no electricity, no phones, and science as we know it today did not yet exist. Most people believed that the Earth was the center of the universe. They thought the sun moved around us because that's what the church taught. And if the church said it, it wasn't a theory, it was truth. Anyone who questioned it was a sinner, sometimes even executed. Into that world, on February 15, 1564, a baby was born, Galileo Galilei. He wasn't born in luxury. His family was intelligent but poor. His father, Vincenzo Galilei, was a talented musician and a deep thinker who challenged traditional ideas about music. He questioned rules that had been followed for centuries. That spirit of independence was passed directly to his son. His mother, Giulia Eminati, was strict and strong, determined that her children would rise above poverty. Galileo was the eldest of 6, and life was difficult. They often struggled with money and moved houses several times. But from childhood, Galileo stood out. He was endlessly curious. He loved to watch the sky, to notice patterns in how things moved. He kept asking why. One day during church, a small lamp swinging from the ceiling caught his attention. Most people saw just a lamp. Galileo saw motion. He measured his pulse while watching it swing and realized that each swing took the same amount of time, no matter how wide or small the arc. He had discovered the principle of the pendulum, something that centuries later would make clocks precise. And he was only a boy. Galileo's father wanted him to become a doctor because doctors earned good money. So at 17, Galileo entered the University of Pisa to study medicine. But he quickly realized he hated it. He wasn't interested in herbs or anatomy. He was fascinated by mathematics and motion, by how the stars moved and how objects fell. He secretly began to attend math lectures, borrowed books, and taught himself geometry and physics. Soon he knew more than most of his professors. Finally, he left medical school to follow his true passion, science. It was a risky choice. He had no money, no job, and no promise of success. But he chose knowledge over security. In his early 20s, he earned some fame for inventing a hydrostatic balance, a tool that could measure the purity of metals by comparing their weight in air and water. This made him locally famous, not rich, but respected. At 25, he became a mathematics professor at the University of Padua. He finally had stability and freedom to think, teach, and experiment. Padua was part of the Republic of Venice, a place more open to discussion and debate than most of Europe. It was the perfect home for a young rebel scientist. Galileo's lectures were full of energy. He didn't just read from books, he demonstrated experiments in front of his students. When others said, "Aristotle said so," Galileo replied, "Let's test it." He studied motion, how things fall, how fast they roll, how they accelerate. There were no stopwatches, so he built water clocks, bowls that dripped water at a steady rate. By measuring how much water dripped, he measured time. And from those experiments, he discovered something revolutionary. The speed of a falling object does not depend on its weight. People had believed for 2,000 years, because Aristotle said so, that heavy things fall faster. Galileo proved them wrong. He even climbed the Leaning Tower of Pisa, dropping balls of different weights to show they landed together. Spectators were shocked. The church, however, was not pleased. Such ideas contradicted holy authority. But Galileo believed that truth must come from observation, not tradition. Money was still a struggle. Professors were poorly paid, and Galileo had to support his family. He also had 3 children with Marina Gamba, a woman from Venice. They never married, which created social difficulties. His daughters, Virginia and Livia, faced judgment for being born outside marriage. To protect them, Galileo sent them to a convent. Virginia became Sister Maria Celeste, and she remained her father's greatest emotional support. Her letters, full of affection and encouragement, would comfort him during his darkest years. In 1609, something extraordinary reached Italy. News that a Dutch craftsman had built a tube with lenses that made distant objects appear closer. It was called a telescope. Galileo, hearing about it, decided to build one himself without ever seeing the original. Using mathematics and his imagination, he ground and polished lenses by hand. His first model magnified objects 3 times, then 8 times, then 30 times. That simple wooden tube would change the world. One clear night, Galileo aimed his telescope at the moon. He was astonished. The moon wasn't smooth and perfect as people thought. It had mountains, valleys, and craters. It was a world of its own. Then he looked at the Milky Way, that faint band of light across the sky. Through the telescope, he saw that it was not mist but countless tiny stars. For the first time in history, humanity could truly see the universe. One night he pointed the telescope at Jupiter and noticed 4 small lights beside it. Night after night he watched them move. He realized they were moons orbiting Jupiter, proof that not everything revolved around Earth. In 1610, Galileo published his discoveries in Sidereus Nuncius, the Starry Messenger. The book spread rapidly. He described the moon's rough surface, the stars of the Milky Way, and Jupiter's 4 moons. Scientists were amazed, philosophers were puzzled, and the church was alarmed. Galileo became a celebrity, appointed chief mathematician to the Grand Duke of Tuscany. But fame brought risk. His observations supported Nicolaus Copernicus's theory that the Earth moved around the sun. The church had already declared that idea heresy. Soon, priests accused Galileo of trying to rewrite scripture. They said his telescope lied, that it created illusions. But Galileo insisted, "I am not against faith, I am against blindness." He believed that reason and belief could live together. He famously said, "I do not feel obliged to believe that the same God who has endowed us with sense, reason, and intellect intended us to forego their use." Galileo kept observing. When he studied Venus, he found that it showed phases like the moon, proof that it orbited the sun. It was undeniable. The sun was truly at the center. By 1616, the tension exploded. The church banned discussion of the sun-centered model. Galileo was warned to stay silent. For a few years, he obeyed publicly. But privately, he continued writing letters encouraging students to think for themselves. By the late 1620s, Galileo's health was declining. He had arthritis and frequent headaches, but his determination remained unshaken. In 1623, A new pope was elected, Pope Urban VIII, once a friend and admirer of Galileo. At first, Galileo felt hopeful. The Pope allowed him to discuss heliocentrism as a mathematical theory, not as a fact. Galileo took that opportunity to write his masterpiece, Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems. The book was written as a conversation between three characters: Salviati, representing Galileo's voice in defending the sun-centered model; Simplicio, representing those who still believed the Earth was at the center; Sagredo, a neutral observer asking questions. It was a clever way to present ideas as discussion rather than argument, but readers quickly realized which side Galileo supported. Salviati sounded brilliant, Simplicio sounded foolish. When the book was published in 1632, it spread like wildfire across Europe. Scientists were inspired. The church was outraged. Some officials even thought that Simplicio's name, meaning simple-minded, mocked the Pope himself. The friendship between Galileo and Urban VIII collapsed. The book was banned, and Galileo was summoned to Rome to face the Roman Inquisition. He was 69 years old, frail, sick, and nearly blind, but he went. He was interrogated for weeks, accused of violating the church's warning from 1616. He defended himself, saying, "I only presented both sides of the argument." But the judges wanted submission, not logic. They threatened torture and even death. Finally, on June 22, 1633, in front of the Inquisition, Galileo was forced to kneel and publicly deny that the Earth moves. He said he was wrong and promised never to teach it again. He obeyed with his mouth, but not with his mind. Legend says that after rising from his knees, he whispered, "E per se muove," and yet it moves. Whether he said it or not, those words became the symbol of defiance. The church spared his life, but sentenced him to house arrest for the rest of his days. Galileo spent his first months confined in Siena, then was allowed to live under guard in his own villa in Arcetri, near Florence, not far from the convent where Maria Celeste lived. Even in captivity, his daughter wrote to him constantly, sending prayers, food, and words of love. Her letters were his light in darkness. But only months after the trial, tragedy struck. Maria Celeste died in 1634. Galileo was devastated. His health worsened. His eyesight faded until he became completely blind. Yet even without sight, he continued to think, to teach, to dictate his ideas to loyal students like Vincenzo Viviani and Evangelista Torricelli, who would later invent the barometer. In 1638, he completed another masterpiece, Two New Sciences. It focused on motion, strength of materials and acceleration, foundations of modern physics. The book was secretly smuggled out of Italy and printed in the Netherlands, beyond church control. Even under house arrest, even in blindness, Galileo's ideas traveled farther than his body ever could. He was weak in flesh but unstoppable in spirit. As years passed, Galileo's discoveries were confirmed by others. Scientists across Europe built telescopes and saw the same things. The mountains of the moon, the moons of Jupiter, the phases of Venus. The truth could no longer be buried. By the time Galileo died on January 8, 1642, at 77 years old, he was still officially a prisoner. He received no grand funeral. He was buried quietly near Florence, but ideas cannot be imprisoned. Within a few decades, his observations became the foundation of a new worldview. In Germany, Johannes Kepler confirmed the laws of planetary motion, showing that planets move in ellipses, not circles. In France, René Descartes promoted logic and doubt as tools of reason. And in England, the year Galileo died, a baby was born, Isaac Newton. Newton grew up studying Galileo's writings. He once said, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Galileo was one of those giants. Newton took Galileo's questions and transformed them into mathematical laws of motion and gravity, completing what Galileo had begun. Galileo's story became more than science. It became a symbol proof that truth can outlive fear. For centuries after his death, the church remained silent. But time has a way of revealing what is right. In 1718, the ban on Galileo's dialogue was partially lifted. By the 1800s, schools across Europe taught his theories openly. His name became synonymous with discovery. In the 1900s, scientists and philosophers around the world called him the father of modern science. But one final act of justice was still missing. It came in 1992, more than 350 years after his trial. Pope John Paul II publicly acknowledged that the church had been wrong. He declared Galileo a man of faith and reason, and said his condemnation had been unjust. The silence was finally broken. In 1989, NASA launched a spacecraft named Galileo to study Jupiter, the very planet he had observed through his telescope 4 centuries earlier. The spacecraft sent back thousands of images, revealing new moons, storms, and magnetic fields. When its mission ended in 2003, it was directed into Jupiter's atmosphere, a poetic farewell. A man who once watched Jupiter through a glass tube now had a machine named after him orbiting and falling into that same world. On Earth, his legacy lives everywhere. Craters on the moon bear his name. The European GPS system is called Galileo, and museums across Italy preserve his books, tools, and even the telescope lenses he made by hand. In Florence, inside the Basilica of Santa Croce, where Michelangelo is buried, stands a grand tomb honoring Galileo. Pilgrims from around the world visit it to pay respect to the man who refused to be silent. Galileo's greatest legacy is not just in machines or mathematics, it is in how we think. Today, whenever a child asks why, or a student says, let's test it, that is Galileo speaking through time. He taught us that you don't have to be powerful to speak the truth. You don't have to follow the crowd to see clearly. And you don't have to be perfect to change the world. All you need is one brave mind that refuses to obey blindly. Because one man, standing alone with a small telescope, changed the destiny of human knowledge. And though centuries have passed, his light still shines in every classroom, every laboratory, every night sky, and in every curious mind that dares to ask, why not? Thank you for listening. Now you know not only Galileo's life, but the lesson behind it. That truth may be silenced for a while, but it always finds its voice again. Galileo Galilei, forever remembered, forever shining. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next one.